Samuel Logan Bringle is a dearly loved Salvationist whose influence cannot be underestimated and can still be felt today, over 70 years after his death. Bringle placed upon paper and spoke with clear eloquence the heart of the Salvationist vision for holiness. Samuel Logan Bringle was born in 1860, the only child to devout Methodist parents. At the age of 2, his father died from a wound he had received during the American Civil War. His mother remarried a doctor, who soon traded his craft for the life of a farmer due to economic reasons. It was here that within Bringle a great work ethic was instilled. At the age of 13, young Samuel would become a Christian at a revival meeting. 5 nights in a row he would go forward to commit his life to the Lord, seeking that elusive assurance of salvation. But it wasn't until he had told his mother personally that he had given his life to the Lord did an assurance of salvation attend his soul. Yet the assurance of his salvation did not remove the guilt he felt over his remaining sin. Though Jesus Christ had definitely changed his life when he was 13, several unpleasant spiritual failures deeply troubled Samuel when he later reflected over his life. While he knew he was a Christian, Bringle was troubled by that remaining tendency in himself to sin so easily. The issue came to a climax during his theological studies. Poring over the scriptures and reflecting in particular upon 1 John 1:7, Samuel concluded that God was able to cleanse him from all sin. He felt the big obstacle of his personal victory over all sin was his ambition to win the esteem and admiration of thoughtful, educated people. This was preventing him from surrendering his all to Christ. It was after coming to a place where he was able to finally surrender his ambitions and heart to God that what came to be known as the second blessing overwhelmed him. He described this sanctifying moment. On January the 9th, 1885, at about 9 o'clock in the morning, God sanctified my soul. He gave me such a blessing as I never dreamed a person could have this side of heaven. It was a heaven of love that came into my heart. I walked out over Boston Common before breakfast, weeping for joy and praising God. Oh, how I loved in that hour. I knew Jesus and I loved him till my heart would break with love. But Samuel Logan Bringle was a righteously restless soul, always seeking the true depths of God and the most committed lifestyle to serve him. What is this fire? It is love, faith, hope, passion, purpose, determination, devotion. It is a divine discontent with formality, ceremonialism, lukewarmness, noise, he said. It was this mindset that attracted him to the Salvation Army. After hearing General William Booth speak in Boston in 1886, his heart was one for the lost. So he headed to London, England to meet the renowned William Booth. It was here that his heart for the mission of the Salvation Army was challenged. General Booth rejected him from his army, stating that he felt Logan to be potentially incompatible with the structure and demands of the Salvation Army due to his education, which may indeed cause a sense of pride and arrogance. Also, there was a sense of refinement about Bringle, which, at this time, was not welcome in an army that was waging war on the front lines of sin. So, General Booth sent him away. Yet this American, resolute and determined, returned to confront General Booth. Finally, Booth gave him the humbling task of cleaning boots. Bringle would later write, "The greater the humility, the greater the boldness, if mixed with faith." Through the door of service and humility, Bringle found a place for himself in the Salvation Army. But on his first assignment in America, this calling would surely be tested. While in Boston, he would sustain a terrible injury from a flying brick thrown by an agitator. Bringle, though, soon turned his 18-month recovery period into a redeeming period of time. He wrote several articles for Salvationist literature, which would soon later be gathered into a volume published as Helps to Holiness. In it, he wrote, "Man does not discover God. God reveals himself to man. God seeks man before man seeks God. God reveals his wisdom and power through nature. He reveals his holiness through conscience. He reveals his hatred of sin through his judgments. He reveals his redeeming love through faith." Bringle's life and theology was shaped by much trial and resolve, war and victory, where in the trenches of the battle, in the crucible of experience, and in the candle-lit nights of Bible study, a theology and life of holiness was formed. A holiness that was promised, a holiness that could extinguish the presence of sin and the sways of Satan. In his book, The Way of Holiness, Bringle states, "Sanctification is to have temper and all sin taken away, in the heart filled with love to God and man. For that is sanctification, that is holiness. It is, in our measure, to be made like God. It is to be made a partaker of the divine nature." Samuel Logan Bringle believed and preached wholeheartedly that to each Christian soul there is not just a promise of salvation, delivered from the penalty of sin, and a progressive power to overcome the dreaded sickness, but an empowering so complete that a life of utter victory can be attained. This experience and theology, though wildly debated within the Christian community, Samuel Logan Bringle was able to reinforce scripturally and articulately. His words remain an inspiration to every new generation of Salvationists seeking the best of God's blessed life of holiness. Holiness makes a man so sure of the presence and love and care of God that while doing with his might what his hands find to do, he refuses to worry and sings from his heart, "I will trust thee, I will trust thee. All my life thou shalt control." And he is certain that while he trusts and obeys, neither devils nor men can do him real harm, nor defeat God's purposes for him. It was Samuel Logan Bringle's firm belief that a life of holiness, which was required by God and revealed by Christ, was not just the standard of Christian living, but also a promise given by God. Because sin is so utterly contemptible to God, Bringle argues that God is compelled to give us utter victory over its presence. Bear with me while we take a glimpse into the dark depths of what God sees, at what grieves and provokes him, at some symptoms and manifestations of this hateful thing called sin, which stirred his heart of infinite love and pity and holiness to make such sacrifice to save sinners. This line of reasoning became the prevalent thought within the Salvation Army, which became an instrument for personal revival for millions of believers all over the world. It would become a major contributing factor and specific camp of what is known as the holiness movement. Though the Salvation Army is not responsible for the holiness movement, they certainly expressed it and lived it out in a very unique way. This holiness of life and heart that Bringle possessed was not his to keep. It was not merely an absence of sin, but a powerful, consuming indwelling of love. And it was to be expressed in a deeply affectionate worship that immediately turned with an intense love for others. Bringle declared, "The Salvation Army was born not in a cloister, nor in a drawing room, but on a spiritual battlefield at a penitent farm. It has been nourished for spiritual conquests, not upon speculative doctrines and fine-spun verbal distinctions, but upon these great doctrines which can be wrought into and worked out in soul-satisfying experience. Hence, the Salvation Army compels the attention of all men everywhere and appeals to the universal heart of humanity."